In the recent blockbuster The Martian, astronaut Mark Watney is left behind on Mars after a huge storm. Left alone for weeks, Watney decides to make it possible for him to survive by growing potatoes on Mars while waiting for a rescue mission. Now, throughout the making of this movie, the producers actually worked very closely with NASA, and a lot of the film is actually pretty scientifically accurate. Just like the movie suggests, the conditions on Mars are actually very hostile and dangerous. The average temperature on Mars is negative 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and it can even drop to negative 100 degrees at night. The thin atmosphere, mostly made of carbon dioxide, is unbreathable and can support huge dust storms. The gravitational pull on Mars is only 38% that of Earth's, and that can make living on Mars extremely difficult and could even exacerbate bone or muscle problems. And also, the planet is subject to a lot of harmful UV rays from the sun. The dust storm shown in the movie is not completely accurate though. Since the Martian atmosphere is only 1% as thick as Earth's, a 100-mile-per-hour wind on Mars would only be as powerful as a 10-mile-per-hour wind on Earth. Those winds would not be nearly powerful enough to knock people over as they showed in the movie. Growing food on Mars, though, is an interesting concept that scientists have been working on for a while now. As we all know, in order for plants to survive, they must undergo photosynthesis, which is when they take carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight and create oxygen and sugar or food for the plant. So the question is it possible for plants to undergo photosynthesis on Mars? Well, carbon dioxide is already found naturally in Mars' atmosphere, and it's actually quite abundant on Mars. And Watney's dangerous method of producing water that was shown in the movie may work, but it's likely very unnecessary. It is still unclear exactly how much water it is on Mars, but if there is some way to extract water from deep within the surface of Mars, this would likely be the ideal way to provide water for plants. Now moving on to sunlight. When trying to grow plants within a greenhouse on Mars, getting enough sunlight for the plants to grow is pretty difficult. Instead, scientists on the ISS managed to use red, green, and blue LED lights to provide the same effect as sunlight. Now, Martian soil doesn't have a lot of the same nutrients that soil on Earth does, and it's also very fine and allows water to seep through it quickly. But Watney seemed to provide the right solution in the movie. Human waste and other fertilizers can provide a boost of nutrients like nitrogen, and can also change the texture so that water can cling to it for longer. However, there are also very hazardous chemicals in Martian soil called perchlorates, and these would need to be removed before any plants can be grown. But don't lose hope on growing food in Martian soil, because in 2014, a study showed that tomatoes, wheat, and mustard leaves all grew well in simulated Martian soil. But another problem that we may run into when trying to grow food on Mars is the issue of partial gravity. As I mentioned before, the gravitational pull on Mars is only 38% of the gravitational pull on Earth, and plants use this gravity to orient themselves on Earth. When scientists tried to grow willow seedlings in microgravity on the ISS, some of these plants grew twisted without the ability to orient themselves. But now, the ISS has managed to create a system that allows them to grow plants in this environment, but it's still unclear whether this will work on Mars as well. This plant growing system has a supply of nutrients as well as red, green, and blue LED lights to simulate sunlight. With this system, astronauts were able to sample the first ever romaine lettuce ever grown in space. So while the Martian storm in the beginning may not have been as accurate, growing food on Mars seems to be an increasingly feasible feat, as long as we're able to extract water from Mars, remove perchlorates and add fertilizers to the soil, and provide adequate light.